Welcome to the Demystify Technology podcast from the Maclaurin Group.
Typically, you go through the due diligence process. What the world of private equity?
Right. Can't wait. Demystify it.
Welcome back to Demystifying Technology. We have joining us today, Dom and Christian from Canada. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks so much. I don't think we've ever been introduced that way. That's just by the Americans. Thank you so much.
Not all of us. Just point of order.
Wow, you're going to lord that over us.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason we stepped out from under your thumb. So
we're going to come right out the gates.
So let's start off with introductions. Christian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Christian Redshaw. I'm one of the partners at CyberSC, and I come from a risk management and commercial insurance background. So cybersecurity came to me in a very roundabout way, and I have Dominic Vogel to thank for bringing me into this crazy, awesome world we now find ourselves in.
Dominic.
Well, emphasis on crazy. I've been doing cybersecurity my entire professional career, close to 15 years now, and Christian and I actually met during my final pit stop in my illustrious / barn-burning career in the corporate world. We met in the crazy system here in Greater Vancouver, and for whatever reason, we hit it off. It wasn't quite like when Harry met Sally, but it was close enough, and we've developed a really great friendship and partnership over the years, and it's been wonderful what we've been able to build here at CyberSC, and we really focus on working with small and mid-sized organizations and private equity firms across North America and in some cases the world. It's a fun space to be in right now.
So now you've really screwed me up, Dom. So all I can visualize now is you two sitting in a restaurant on your first date.
I'm powerful at visuals out
there. Thank you.
Well, in that case, we'll have what they're having. So security, it's a big deal, I hear.
Yeah, it's pretty big, and one of the things which I know Christian and I are very fond of saying this, which for the longest time, especially during much of my career, it was really only the domain of large companies. Only the big enterprise companies needed to worry about cybersecurity. And that was even pretty true, even as little as, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. But now, when you fast forward to today, when we're talking about it being an existential threat, it's truly an existential threat and risk for small and mid-sized organizations. The very business, the very organization is at stake if they don't invest properly in cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think like when we're doing due diligence, etc., security has become more and more in the sort of forefront, and you still get up against companies that have the attitude of, well, we're too small. It's not going to happen to us. Who would hack us? And I sometimes liken it to like a relay switch. Yeah, they may not be wanting to hack you per se for what you're sitting on, but you could unlock the key to something bigger. So don't be part of that sort of value chain of letting that loose. So with that in mind, we wanted to bring you guys on, talk about effectively the sort of things that we've seen in due diligence with respect to sort of security, but also to get your take on what do you see as the sort of the common issues that are faced with small to medium-sized companies, and sort of the CTO or the CEO that's listening to this at this precise moment. What could you say to them that would resonate to say that, yeah, that's familiar, or, ooh, I need to pay a little bit more attention to that because, again, I'm under this apprehension that I'm not big enough to worry about that sort of thing. So what would be your top 3 things in terms of the litmus test, the canary in the mine, as it were?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I can certainly start with that. I think when we go back decades in the past, the value of companies was in the assets. And I think in the digital age right now, you're looking at the value being intangible and still very, very real. So the value is often in the data. That's the gold, or that's the new oil, if you will. And so when you buy a company, you buy that company's data and you buy effectively the risks to that data. And unfortunately, when you're in a situation when you're acquiring another company, you might not discover those vulnerabilities or risks until long after the closing of the deal. So that's the first thing to keep in mind is, hey, this is the value of the company, and you want to catch it on the left side of the deal, not on the right side of the deal.
So give us an example of a vulnerability. What gives something I could tangibly point to?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Doug.
I'll be a little bit more specific and get Christian to backfill here, but when you're talking about sort of that canary in the coal mine item there, Alan, and to me, it's all about asking the right questions. And there's certain questions which if you ask them, and you see them not being fulfilled, you know that it's indicative of a larger problem. So as an example, we go into an organization and we say, well, can you demonstrate to us how you're looking at performing vulnerability management? So vulnerability management is the ability to identify and know all the vulnerabilities within your organization at any given moment. Now, if an organization struggles with that and is not able to do that, chances are they're struggling with patch management as well. So that means they're struggling with that, they're struggling with vulnerability management, and we tend to see a trickle-down effect. If they're struggling with keeping their assets up to date, they tend to be really crappy at managing their administrator access. If they're really crappy at managing their administrator access, they're just pretty much generally crappy at administrating or controlling any user access. That means that data is just free-flowing all over the place. So it's to me, what we find is that when you see some of these basics not being done well, it's like this domino effect. When one's not being done well, especially with most small, mid-sized organizations, it's a domino effect right across the
So in terms of, it'd be kind of like if I was the owner, well, I am the owner of a house. It's me not knowing where all my windows are and all my doors are. It's how could a thief get into the house? And if I'm not aware that the back door is always open, I'm not even thinking about securing the back door.
God forbid, don't leave the front door open.
It comes down to almost this state of awareness. And when we talk about security awareness in this context, not necessarily talking about knowing what not to click on or the current threats. It's that awareness, like you mentioned there, Alan, at the CEO level, the CTO level, in which it's still so prevalent, that level of thinking that we are a small business, or who would want the data that we have? No one's going to come after us. That mindset is still so prevalent across SMBs, right across North America, and it's at the detriment of long-term growth for many of these organizations. So when we talk about gaps and when we talk about threats and hackers and all that, I always say to people, you know what? The greatest enemy that you should be worrying about is the person that you look at in the mirror every day. And no, that's not your spouse. That's you. So it's important to realize that they need to fix that mindset first and foremost.
Yeah, I do worry about that guy because he freaks me out. But I would expect that to a large extent, when you run into those situations, what you're talking about is almost cultural, right? And you can come in and provide, insight quickly. They can react to it, but it's not. You walk out the door. How do you counsel these guys to keep up the fight, right? Because it's not. I'll do it today and I'll be good for 3 years. I better be on top of this, and I better adjust the culture to be so that this stays relevant to everybody in the organization.
Yeah, I think that goes to something that we wanted to mention, which is that cybersecurity is not just a technology issue where you can just buy a magic bullet solution and then that takes care of your cybersecurity. In other words, a firewall and antivirus and we're good. And, what does every organization that has been successfully breached in the past have in common? They all have antivirus and firewall, so that's not going to cut it. Your policies need to be there. You need to have the right governance, and you also need to train your people, and that includes the leadership as well. They've got to set the tone and the example from the top and make sure that that's happening throughout the organization.
I like your analogy. That just reminded me. The number one cause of divorce is marriage. So,
cause and effect. Baby.
Yeah, exactly. So just because I've got a firewall doesn't necessarily mean I've got what it is. So what other placebos are there that we wrap ourselves around, that we convince ourselves we've got security linked?
Yeah, that's a really good point there. I mean, the whole notion of false sense of security, and I would say there's a couple items, and Christian was mentioning at the very end, people who are stuck in that 1995 level of thinking of, we have a firewall, we have antivirus, we have an IT managed service provider, or we have an IT guy or an IT team. They handle all that stuff, and we're good. That all contributes to that false sense of security. And in many ways, it's almost a layer of obscurity in which many CEOs and COOs, they don't understand enough in terms of where that translation or where that conduit is from the technical piece, and they just assume that cybersecurity is purely a technology problem that can be solved by someone in IT or by an IT service provider. And exactly to Christian's point there, even assuming if the IT service provider or the IT team does get the technology play right, you're still failing at the people and policy or process level.
I think the thing to keep in mind is they're the same cyber criminals that are attacking the large enterprises who have the security department or have a chief information security officer are the people that are attacking the small and mid-sized organizations who actually are squarely in the crosshairs right now. And so you need the same kind of protection. If you fall under that line of not being a big enterprise, your data is still important to you. Maybe it can't be resold on the black market for a profit necessarily to the degree of large deposits of data in an enterprise, but it's still valuable to you. And if your systems get locked down by something like ransomware, that's going to cost you big time in terms of downtime and in terms of reputation. To the point where it can actually, if your organization is small enough and you don't have the resources, it can actually take you off the map completely.
Well, you actually bring up a good point there. Wasn't it Garmin recently that was under attack of a ransomware, etc.? And again, there are organizations that are being attacked not because there's anything necessarily valuable there. It's just to be irritable. It's just to, in many respects, to show that they can do it. And maybe practicing for a bigger target. So again, don't be the trial company to which people come after you for. Be the tighten up where you can. So we talked about sort of the placebos, etc. So I think we've covered two items of our top three there. What would be the third thing that as a CTO and a CEO that I'm sort of looking out over my landscape and I should be thinking,
I think the thing about it is you want to get cybersecurity due diligence on your team, on the deal team, early in the deal, and then at every stage along the way. Then that's for your acquisition targets. Then the other thing is, okay, maybe you haven't done that in the past, so that means you're sitting on a portfolio of companies that you haven't done this due diligence on. So at some point, you want to start working this into your current portfolio to assess what the data asset value is and what the threats and protections are for your portfolio companies.
Yeah, and I think when you, as you mentioned, the value of the data asset, when you talk about ransomware, it's what is the value of your revenue at that point? Because that can shut it all down, right?
Absolutely. And what we're seeing too with a ransomware perspective, in which before it was, or the earlier days of ransomware, it was just this idea in which if your data was being held for ransom. Now it's even taking a step further, which your systems are being held for ransom, which for most organizations, I always like to say, unless you're selling tacos out of the back of your mother's Volvo, you are a digital company. And for most organizations, if they are unable to access their systems, their business grinds to a halt. Regardless of if the data is being stolen or not, they can't access their systems. Business stops. If business stops, that affects revenue. The confidentiality of the data is preserved. Then there's the integrity of that data, and then there's the availability of that data in systems. So what we're seeing now is ransomware is affecting both the confidentiality of data and also now the availability of those data in key systems. So even if there's organizations that don't really care about the confidentiality about the data, if they're not able to do their work, they are going to pay the ransom. Right? So I think it's important to understand understand that cybersecurity isn't always just about protecting the data. It's about making sure that any of the core systems are protected and available at all times.
So you guys actually offer something that's quite exciting, because one of the things that we see a lot is when we're going through all the sort of documentation of due diligence and what have you, they'll proudly say, yeah, we had a security audit 6 months ago. How long ago? So, and again, it's
years ago.
Exactly, and in a modern day, it's kind of like having a COVID test. It takes 14 days
Yes.
to come back. Makes no sense whatsoever. So, but you guys have a product whereby you've got this sort of monthly check-in, and you're keeping people very much alive in that. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I can start that off. So typically, the beginning of our engagement with clients is a baseline cyber risk assessment. So that's in the three big buckets of the people, process, and technology, and we assess their cyber risks and protections of over 20 categories of cyber risk. And then from that, what we look at is, okay, what are the quick wins, the biggest bang for your cybersecurity buck, where you're spending the least amount for the biggest amount of risk reduction out of the gate. And it's usually 3 or 4 main areas or action items that we try to look after in the first year. And then a multi-year roadmap for the rest of the important but less urgent matters over the coming years. And effectively what we do is we stick with our clients on a year-by-year basis. We do monthly or quarterly leadership meetings. We do awareness training sessions to begin on the journey of the looking after the people. We help them with things like cybersecurity questionnaires, as you guys alluded to earlier. You could be in the supply chain of bigger companies if you are a small and mid-sized company. So if these big companies are wanting to assess you, they need accurate answers to your security picture. We look after that, fill those out for you. So in a nutshell, that's the partnership that we provide.
And would you say that you're sort of like the outsourced chief security officer services, or is that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we call it outsourced cybersecurity leadership. So effectively, if you fall below maybe 500 employees a month, 500 employees a month. If you fall below 500 employees total, you can have them every month. Then you probably
that's good to know, because that there's a whole swathe of companies.
So we can come in and provide those capabilities on a part-time basis for you.
Good. So as we think about this, and we went through our top 3 list, what would you say is probably one of the biggest fallacies of security in today's modern day architecture?
Ooh, that's a good question. What I would say is one of the greatest fallacies is we're in the cloud. Our services are all with Amazon. Everything is in AWS or Azure. And people just equate that with being 100% secure. And that is, I would say, one of the biggest security fallacies right now. There's still so many executives and CEOs, even CTOs, who don't understand that there's something that's referred to as the shared responsibility model. Just because your application, your platform exists in the quote-unquote cloud doesn't make it inherently secure. Yes, it's definitely more secure than if you were hosting it on a server at in your basement. Yeah, absolutely. But there's still levels of security that fall on your responsibility. You don't outsource 100% of the security. Underlying infrastructure, the underlying physical protections, that's all on the cloud provider, Amazon, Microsoft Azure, what have you. But at the end of the day, as an organization, you're still responsible for the data security. You're still responsible for the application level security and the user level security. So that's still so lost on so many organizations, and I can't tell you how many times we've gone into a prospect and we talk with them, and they say, we don't need security. Everything we do is in AWS. I was like, okay, well, if you're taking that approach, I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise. So it's a dangerous fallacy, which equates very much a very serious false sense of security.
Yeah, and I would say right beside that is what Dominic referred to earlier, which is IT's got it covered. So either your IT department or your IT managed service provider, they've got that's their domain is cybersecurity, and your IT MSP is more than happy to just go along with that myth so they can keep the contract with your company. It's a very dangerous thing, and really that amounts to you can outsource the function of IT, but you can't outsource the risk of your sensitive information.
I think that's our podcast title. You can't outsource security.
Yeah.
I think we've nailed it. Thank you, chaps. It took 25 minutes to get there, but we've got our title.
We'll start with that one next time.
And Dom, I know right now Ryan Birch will be listening to this. He's our VP of Engineering here, and he's also known as our cloud cop. And he will be if you receive money in the mail, it's because he rides us like a $2 show pony about the security associated with all of our cloud accounts.
Yes. Well, I look forward to getting that residual check from him, man.
It's monopoly money to you. You don't use the US dollar up there. I mean, it's no use to you.
Well, why the US dollar here? I could almost get a down payment on the house.
We'll send tacos. We'll enjoy it.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. That was hugely insightful. And like I say, I think security is one of those sort of things that we always take for granted that somebody else has got it covered. And I think you've brought up the fact that, no, you kind of need to keep an eye on it and a continual eye on it.
Absolutely. SpongeBob and I couldn't agree more.
Inspirational.
And for those on the audio, Dom is actually holding up SpongeBob. He's not referring to Christian in that loving way that he usually does. So,
and it's not a stuffed product. It is the full-size, legitimate SpongeBob. And gentlemen, I just want to say thank you for being here and coming all the way down from Canada. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Take care.